I'm so excited to be here today with Jess Attridge. And Jess and I actually came across each other. It's funny, I moved to this small little beach town outside of Boston and didn't know anybody for the longest time. And now I just feel so blessed to find new community, new people. But Jess happens to live and grew up in this town called Marblehead. And so excited to connect with her. And we've spent some time just she's an incredible human and her story is incredible. So with that said, Jess, I'm so blessed to have met you and having you on here, giving you the space to talk about your story. But can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Like Kate said, my name is Jess Attridge, and I am a holistic health coach or holistic life coach, I'll say. And my work now is centered mainly around mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. My career did begin working with the body, which I will get to. But before I got there, what really got me into this work as a whole was my own desperation. Like most people, I grew up with some unresolved childhood trauma, and that started manifesting. I was probably, 10 years old when I can kind of first remember developing an awareness around shame because I was, repeatedly doing these behaviors that didn't feel good to do, which I now know were coping mechanisms. And so I started to hate myself because I thought that because I hated my behaviors, I hated who I was as a person, which again, I now know behavior and identity are two totally different things. But that core belief really created my reality. And because I had such, low self-worth and I really had little regard for my life, this all kind of peaked into 4 years of really deep pain, of feeling like I had no identity, no purpose, but also things like I felt stuck in abusive relationships, and there was daily substance abuse and cycling through rehabs and the whole thing. And granted, I was in traditional talk therapy for almost a decade at this point, and I just felt like I had gotten nowhere. Like I really, thinking back to that time, I had gained no deeper understanding, and I really felt like I had no tools to help me. So somehow I slowly did start moving away from that toxic lifestyle. And I think from the outside, it looked like things were getting better,
Yep.
but internally, I felt the exact same way. No identity, no purpose, no direction, still super emotionally reactive, very little self-control. I felt like life was coming at me. And I had very little hope because I knew no other way of life or version of myself. And what I now call an absolute stroke of fate, I somehow managed to get a personal training certification during that time. And it wasn't something that I used for another, year and a half because I had a lot of my own healing to do, but that is an important part of my bigger story. So I was physically removed from the old lifestyle, internally still fighting a lot of the same stuff. Again, didn't have the tools for the emotional or mental healing. So what I did was revert to something that I knew had helped me feel better in the past, which was working out. And granted, that was something that I didn't always have the best relationship with in the past, but still, it was like all I knew to do at that time. So I simultaneously started working out and working at the local YMCA as a personal trainer. And, a few months later, I was due for some continued education for the personal training certification. And at random, which I can now see as the divine unfolding of my path, I chose a mind body fitness certification. And this was really the first time that I learned about things like, positive affirmations and really just the power that we have to rewire our mind.
Yep.
And like a moth to a flame, like I was just hooked. I know we talked about this, like and I'll say too, I can expand on this later, but that tends to be a good sign that you're on an aligned path.
Yes. Yep.
But I was hooked, and I started sharing what I was learning on Instagram. I created a page, which is now my business page. It didn't start that way, and of course, applying these concepts to my own life. And, pretty quickly I started to see some shifts taking place. The first was realizing I was no longer aligned with the long distance relationship that I was in at the time, and thinking maybe the cute guy at the gym that I started working with was more aligned with my new, lifestyle and values and identity. And we've been together for 4 years and plan to spend our life together. So that was, for me, was such a moment of, wow, like intuition came through and I trusted it. And look at the prosperity that it brought me.
It's
So
incredible. Yes.
yeah,
No.
yeah, but that's really where my journey began in the space. Over time, I became more embodied in my own healing, and I, developed my confidence and my coaching identity within this work. And then in 2021, I was taking online courses throughout that year to, again, just get certified in a bunch of holistic healing modalities, which I can expand on later, and started my business in August. I was still working part-time at the gym at the time, but I went all in last May, and I have been full-time in my business ever since.
I love that so much. And thank you so much for sharing some of your story. And I know we'll even get into more, but I think it's so incredible that you found your way and almost on your own. I know that you've had like coaches and stuff like that, but what were your biggest challenges in kind of getting there? Because I feel like even as myself, I've been in that spot where you're like, what am I doing? Like, what's this all for? And not in a suicidal way, but in a like, what's my purpose? I don't understand. And I found myself pretty stuck, but you did it. You kind of like move forward. So what were your challenges and how did you move to where you are?
Totally. I honestly think a big key to my success, I think one of my challenges was trying to be farther ahead in my journey or my healing than I actually was. So the
In there.
success was, yeah, right. Which created so much resistance because I was taking myself out of the magic of the present moment and that season of, life or business or healing that I was in, and missing out on the blessings already available to me. And, I've been really working to rewire this since, around the springtime, where for the first time since starting my business, I intentionally slowed down, which was challenging because previously I was attaching, my worth to my work and my productivity. And I kind of had to have this moment where I pulled back and asked myself, like, but is this productive? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. What
Yeah.
did slowing down look like for you?
You know, it was a lot about pulling back, finding presence, finding fulfillment in what I already have, and, really, yeah, just dropping into more slowness and stillness and balance in my life. And what I have found is that has created truly some of the most profound breakthroughs of my healing journey thus far. Like I'm just loving this season of healing that I'm in, and I think it's because I'm letting it be fun. Like I get to meet myself deeper. I get to have these breakthroughs that alter and expand the way that I view myself in the world. Where before it was kind of coming from this like pressurized, I need to clear this to achieve this breakthrough, and I'm a bad manifester and I'll never create the life that I want. Like that was where I was at. So where I'm at now, it feels a lot lighter on the system because I'm in flow. I'm not in that like pressured, forced energy that I previously was in.
100%. And like, so I feel like a lot of people too on a healing journey do the same thing. Like I feel like I'm still in that with like taking out I have expectations of what my healing journey is going to look like and where I should
Totally.
be and how I should be feeling and stuff like that. But for people who are listening that don't have any experience with like healing, what are some recommendations to even like start to dig into what's my purpose and where to even begin, because it is overwhelming. And if I heard you talking now like a year ago, I'd be like, but how do I do that?
Yes, no, totally. So I um I actually think a big part of soul purpose, there's a few modalities that can be used. Before I kind of dive into my thoughts about soul purpose and all of that, I'd love to talk a little bit about astrology and human design, because I think that
Yes.
would kind of set us up to lead us into that conversation.
Yes.
Because astrology and human design are two things that honestly started more as like personal interests and hobbies that have really become more and more integrated into my professional work. Um, with astrology, we all have a unique birth chart, and you can find that using your birth date, birth time, and birth location. And the way that I see it is that our birth chart was kind of the last thing that our soul signed before it embodied our physical body in this lifetime. So it's a contract, it's our soul's blueprint, and it carries really profoundly powerful cues as to, who you're here to be and how you can best show up in the world. So with astrology, what's happening is all of the planets rule different aspects of our life, and the signs and the houses that these planets fall in can give us more context as to how we can best express that energy. So, for example, I am a Cancer sun. The sun rules the core self. The Cancer is the nurturer, the healer, the emotional. I'm a Pisces moon. The moon represents the inner world, and Pisces is all about like the big dreamer and the intuitive. And then my Leo rising represents my life path, which Leo, wants to express themselves creatively and be seen. So as you can see, I'm very much living in embodiment with my soul blueprint.
Yep.
Um, and now to touch on human design as well, because astrology, we could get into a whole conversation about fate versus free will, but astrology is essentially painting your life story, where human design is, so you need the same thing: birth date, time, and location. And it's more so telling you like the part that you're meant to play within the story. So human design can tell you things like your energetic makeup, how your energy works, how you best make decisions, how you can access your intuition, how you'll know when you're in alignment. And again, a personal example, I'm a 5/1 manifesting generator. The 5 line is the line of the healer. The first line is the line of the investigator, which explains my like obsessive studying of certain topics.
Yes.
And the manifesting generator is like here to shake shit up and do things differently. So again, very much in alignment with the path that I'm on now. Um, so to answer your question about soul purpose, because it's a loaded topic, you
Yeah.
know, I do think there's multiple ways that you can go about, finding this. I do think getting a reading of your astrology and your human design is a really great place to start. But the thing, like, your soul path isn't going to be one that you can rationalize or predict, because it's going to be something that comes through your intuition, and your intuition is soul led. And that is going to be the driver prompting you to take inspired action.
Yep.
And inspired action is not logical, rational action. It's oftentimes action that doesn't make logical sense, right?
Yes.
I think that that's what freezes so many people up, because we've all been so conditioned to, listen to and trust the mind or social constructs or just like the safe known thing to do. But following that path leads a lot of people to living a life of self-limitation, whereas the soul knows no limits.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. It's funny you say that too, because even when I was kind of first figuring out what I wanted to do, I left my corporate career after 15 years and was successful as far as my family or society would say, but I was miserable. So I remember the feedback was when I left, like, you need to get out of your fantasy land. And I'm like, but it's not fantasy land. Like I'm creating a new career out of like creating a directory for people to find it. But anyways, it's just funny because people are like, get out of your fantasy land and your
No,
fantasy world.
I'm so glad you brought that up though, because like I was saying, this is about, trusting your intuition, allowing yourself to follow like the seemingly random urge to do something in a new way or to reach out to a person. Of course, allowing yourself to follow your passions and the things that light you up. But again, I think a lot of people have that experience where it's like, I'm told I can't make a living from this, or this will never be successful or impactful. And it is important to recognize that whoever's saying that to you is projecting, their limitation and conditioning onto you. Because again, this is very systemic, like these core belief systems that we all carry.
Yes.
And sometimes soul purpose might fall into your lap like it did mine, and other times
Yep.
it takes trial and error. Like it's really throwing noodles at a wall and seeing what sticks. But the other piece I want to add is, your soul purpose is ultimately a state of being and not a state of doing.
Ah,
Like my soul purpose isn't coach.
yep.
It is to embody the energy of the healer so that I can gift that to myself
Yeah.
and then, others from an embodied place. So again, with astrology and human design, you can really find some clues here. Like within mine, my sole purpose is being creative. It's being a big dreamer. It's being multifaceted. It's being a trailblazer. So I think that can just be another clue is asking yourself, like, who am I being called to be, and how can I serve others from that aligned state of being?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And it's funny you say that too. And just a side note, I'm also a manifesting generator, but and I've had astrology, right? But I don't know how the two work together, but it's fat. I am like I remember it was like trailblazer going on,
Yes,
creating
right. And
dreamer.
I'm working right now. I'm definitely bringing more astrology services into my professional work. And that's really my goal with it, is I think it can feel like this elusive thing, and people know I'm a Cancer sun, but I don't
Yeah.
know how to practically apply that to my life. And it's like, well, that's where all the magic is. So
Yeah, yeah,
totally. Yep.
100%. Actually, and can you touch on, because it's so funny when we met, I know you're so knowledgeable in so many different modalities, but I'd love to touch on, what some of the modalities are that you work with, and really getting into, what do your clients come to you? What are their biggest challenges, and what do you find that you're working with through them, and what it's like to work with you and stuff like that. So,
Totally. Yeah. So I'll start with the modalities that I really work with. So I would say like you said, I am trained in quite a few modalities. Again, they all essentially fall under mental, emotional, and energetic reprogramming. I will say the three that I use most in my work are probably EFT tapping,
yep.
breath work, and hypnosis.
Yep.
So again, all these modalities are working in some way to rewire that mind body connection. With EFT tapping, you're literally tapping on energy meridian points in your body, similar to, I mean, it is the same ancient Chinese medicine as acupuncture.
Yep.
And what that tapping is doing is regulating your nervous system.
Okay.
And when we regulate our nervous system, we are able to heal ourselves out of chronic states of stress, as well as heal the genetic imprints of our past trauma.
Yep.
So I really see EFT tapping as an energy tool to, essentially, like, we can use it to wipe our emotional slate clean. We can use it to clear limiting beliefs, clear energy blocks. And so that's really powerful for getting us into a state of alignment and healing past trauma, of course. Now, with breath work, we're tuning into a deeper, more intentional breath.
Hmm.
And because most people are spending their life in an unconscious shallow breath. And again, what that's doing is chronically triggering a stress response. So that's keeping so many people stuck in that state of fight or flight. So with breath work, again, we're regulating the nervous system, allowing the body to enter a state of rest. And with breath work, this doesn't go for every style of breath work, but for example, like Wim Hof method breath work, it's actually you consciously putting yourself in a state of stress and pulling yourself out of it. So
Yep.
you're consciously putting yourself into that sympathetic nervous system and then finding the relief in the parasympathetic. And when you do this in a controlled environment, sort of similar to, like cold plunging,
Yep.
things like that, it helps you build up emotional resiliency out when you're out in the world and experiencing stress.
I find too it's a release. That's actually the type of breath work. That was actually my first kind of thing with a breakthrough with like any kind of body work was breath work. I did it once and I felt like these tingle. I was like, oh,
Oh,
this is I just want to like move and like get
yes.
out of this. And
It
then
is, it's fuzzy, and it can
yeah,
be, it can be uncomfortable. It really is. It's a physical demand. And I've noticed too, like with my own practice, like you start and you're doing that long, slow inhale and you're like, it's like the shakiest. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, it's really like it's impacting so much more than just one thing. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, and then with hypnosis, again, I think it's one of those things that kind of feels like this elusive term, because most people know hypnosis from like the movies
Yes.
or the crazy stage performances.
Yes.
Hypnosis is really just meditation with a goal.
Okay.
And the trance that we use in hypnosis is actually a state of being that we naturally fall into twice a day, every single day. So that kind of sweet spot right when you wake up in the morning and you're not totally asleep, but you're not fully in your consciousness. And then right as you're falling asleep at night, when you're like watching a show and you're kind of like in and out, it's that slowed brainwave state that's accessed during this practice. And there's so many ways to use this modality. Some people use it for past life regression, some people use it to break a habit. But I think what I really like about hypnosis, and honestly just like visualization exercises in general, is you're able to program the brain and body, which are typically records of the past, into a map to the future.
Yep.
And I actually have a 2-hour masterclass called Envision, where I do talk about
Awesome.
visualization and applying that to your life in more depth. But because the brain and body are a record of the past, most people feel stuck without realizing that there is an autopilot loop running from within them.
Yeah.
So with hypnosis and visualization, what we're doing is we're pulling forward the new habits and the new behaviors and the new thoughts and the new beliefs and the new identities that you want to be embodying instead, because that's going to be priming the mind to then seek out more of those opportunities in your daily life to express that new being and showing up way of being and showing up in the world.
That makes sense. And can you touch on too, because I think that, a lot of times with change and with this, you have this vision, you're like, I want X for my life and I want these changes and I want these new habits, but you tend to get stuck in the old and like that loop because you're more comfortable with it. So
Yeah,
what is happening there? Because that's, I know, a pretty standard thing for people, even for myself. I've chosen the part that I don't want because it's just comfortable to me, whereas the new stuff that I actually want is uncomfortable. So that's
totally. So, I mean, what our autopilot loop is something that's controlling 95% of your life experience. So it's definitely something to bring awareness to. It's that feeling of going from 0 to 100 emotionally, where you're just in a reaction, and then you kind of pull yourself out of it afterwards, and you're like, told myself I wasn't going to do that again, and there I went, biting someone's head off, or reaching for the tub of ice cream, or hitting snooze, or whatever it is.
yes.
And it's a very real, I think that this is the kind of analogy that I use, is if you imagine yourself standing in front of a fork in the road, a snowy fork in the road. One path has been walked a million times before, so the snow's stamped down, and it's a lot easier to walk in that direction. Whereas the path less followed, it's going to feel uncomfortable, and you're going to have to trudge through it, and there's going to be natural resistance at the start of that. So I think that that's really the important thing to bring front of mind, is like, nothing's wrong with you if you are feeling all of the resistance in the world to simply wake up 25 minutes earlier in the morning. That is your body's natural, system. And really what it's seeking to do is keep you safe. And this is a very primal thing. Our systems are trying to protect us from a saber-toothed tiger, when it's like, no, I just have a job interview. Like,
Yeah.
really, it's not
The
that.
body doesn't know the difference.
The body
Yeah.
doesn't know the difference. Yeah. So it's going into it with the expectation that like the resistance is going to be there, and it's up to me to continue to work through that, because what happens is you start to stamp the snow down in the other direction while the snows over on the other side, and you prune that neural pathway, and it does get easier to act in that new way. But a huge element of this is slowing down, like without a pause. Awareness is really the first step of like, where are these patterns happening in my life? Once you bring awareness to them, you need to slow down. Otherwise, it is just gonna run. It's habitual, and it takes the path of least resistance. So unless you're consciously stepping in, you're gonna keep reacting to life the same way that you always have, instead of consciously responding to it and being able to create it.
Yeah, it's so amazing that you've been through this, but now know so much about it. And like, I don't know, what do you find are the biggest challenges for your clients coming to you and maybe even working through some of this? Do you see
Totally.
themes come up with people?
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I have talked about this, kind of those like three tiers of people that are really kind of coming into my space. I think the first are people that truly have very little understanding of the holistic health space, and that's either because and they're coming to it either, feeling disempowered from the traditional mental health systems, or there's just buzz around holistic healing lately, and they want to know more about what that looks like. And then of course there's people that, they have somewhat of a foundation. They're reading the books and they're listening to the podcasts, but now they want more of that one-on-one guidance, that kind of compassionate mirror, neutral third party to help them start to apply those concepts to their life.
Yep.
And then there's the people that are pretty embodied in this work, and they're just focused on expansion and desiring support in that, because
Yep.
every coach needs a coach.
100%.
Yep.
Yes, that's it. 100%. And what's the journey like with you? And I know it's so different with everybody, but is it like people come in for one session, or do you recommend like, no, probably like 4 to 6 months? And because I know we all want the quick fix, but that is not the real thing. So
Like,
yeah.
yeah, and I'm looking to build those more long-term relationships anyways. Like that's where I feel so much fulfillment from. I mean, I would say close to all of my closest friends in my life currently actually began as clients, which
Yeah.
is just so beautiful.
Yes.
But I will say that, I mean, in context to my one-on-one holistic life coaching, all of my coaching relationships do begin by filling out an intake questionnaire. And I have really found that this is such a great way for me to feel into the energy of the client, see if they're an aligned fit anyways. But we're also just able to kind of jump right into session one with that clear idea of our direction forwards, which I've gone to a lot of people where the whole first session is just talking about everything. I'm like, you could just be an email and then we can just get going. Let's just do it.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that, through trial and error, like I have found what works, and I feel like that does. And I would say too, like, in terms of my coaching, my work is pretty intuitive. Like that relationship is an intuitive us working together to create a plan to make you feel the most supported. So for some people that's
Yeah.
bi-weekly sessions. Other people do desire to check in, more frequently or less frequently. There's definitely still structure. Like my sessions are very solution oriented, so you can guarantee that you're always going to leave with some type of aligned action step. Another part of my work is the ongoing support as well. So whether that's for accountability or motivation or advice, like
Yep.
we stay in communication between sessions as well. And then, I mean, up until this point, I've almost worked exclusively with one-on-one clients outside of some small group coaching and some workshops and stuff. But I do have a super exciting offering launching before the end of the year that is going to expand us into some more group style healing. So I'm feeling super excited about that.
Oh, I can't wait to hear more. I'm like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that. I met my life coach back in 2019, I think, and she's checked in with me through my journey. It's funny because yeah, every coach needs a coach, but I've needed that throughout the different phases of my healing, being like, wait, and now is this normal for this? So it's
Yeah,
just
and even, I mean, there's people that I'll work with for a chunk of time and then I won't hear from them for a couple of months, but they'll call me because they know like I'm that safe person, that we already have a rapport built and I know where they're coming from and I can meet them there. And so there's no like, you're a past client, I'm never working with you. Like this door is always open.
yes, I
Yeah.
think that's so amazing. I know. Oh, and one thing I wanted to bring up too. So I know you're not like therapist, but I do want to touch on the talk therapy thing because I spent years in talk therapy, got nowhere, and it was when I started doing the body work that was like, can you talk about how the difference of talk therapy versus trapped emotions in the body and releasing that? I don't know if that's the correct way to say
It
it.
is.
That's
Yes.
my way of how I understood it. So
No, yeah, that's the perfect way to say it, because that's exactly what it is the difference between processing and releasing.
okay.
And I mean, talk therapy and really even, in holistic approaches to healing, there's still a necessary variable of processing. Like we need to be able to bring awareness to our experiences, give them language, understand our place within them. But a lot of people stop there and then they're like, but I know that I'm this way.
Yes.
Now what? Like,
Yes. It's
and
like, yeah, we've had this conversation over and over. Like, yeah, what do I
yeah,
do with that? How do I move on? Yeah.
totally. Yeah. So with the releasing, it's the somatic work. We're energetic beings and our emotions are energy in motion. And when we experience trauma and pain and discomfort, this energy, if we suppress it and we don't know how to, release it in an aligned way, it gets like, I imagine like a hose, tying a knot in a hose and like trying to let the water run freely through. And I mean, all breath work, EFT tapping, all these things can be so great to clear those blocks. Yeah. So with the difference between processing and releasing, a lot of the time we're prompted to name our emotions, which can definitely be valuable. But again, a lot of the time that keeps us stuck in the mind. And when we find ourselves in a state of overthinking, that's very literally a sign that we are spending too much time in our brain. We are overthinking, and there is another part of our system that we need to be dropping into, and that's neck down, that's into the body. So a big part of that is, identifying the sensations in your body. This can kind of get into some inner child work where you start to ask yourself, like, how old does this experience feel? Because our system, like we were saying, can't know the difference between saber-toothed tiger and job interview. It is generalizing some experience from the past. That's what's being pulled into the present moment. Again, that's the autopilot operating underneath the surface. But a lot of the time, like we're not even getting this far, let alone getting to a place where we're showing up for ourselves in that emotion, because that's a huge part of being able, like, creating a fertile environment to release and face this stuff. We 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 need to be, approaching it from a place of self-compassion
Yep.
and really allowing that sensation space to exist within us without, and a lot of time it's just out of a space of fear. Like, I don't have the tools to handle this. I don't know what to do. So I just know to stuff it down. Again, a lot of the time that's just autopilot.
Just suck it up.
So
It's what you grew up with is suck it up, move on. Like, time
yeah,
heals all wounds and just suck it up.
totally. And, you know, and that's really the key is learning to start getting curious and compassionate. My go-to mantra anytime I'm experiencing something where I can pick up on a program running that's just judgment and shame and whatever it is, I drop into a hands on the heart. Oh God, even though I feel this way, even though I'm thinking this way, and I hate what I think that means about me or my future or whatever it is, I deeply and completely love, accept, and forgive myself. And
Yeah.
that's likely going to feel really weird to do in the beginning. I think a lot of the time, again, it's just due to conditioning of like, well, I'm babying myself, and I'm not going to be able to get anywhere in life if I'm so easy on myself. And it's like, well, how? Let's check in with the results that we're looking at right now, because I don't know if the tough love is always the way to go about it either.
No, no. It's
Yeah,
fascinating too because we're so much harder on ourselves than anybody else. Like I remember one of my therapists was like, "What would you say to a friend or a sibling in this moment?" And I was like, "Not this."
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like, I was like, "Wow, where does this like deep rooted like shame and hate come from?" Like I was so hard on and it's just it
yeah.
when you kind of flip it and look at it that way, I was like mind blown at how hard I was being on myself. And
Yeah, and again, like a lot of the time, it's internalized stuff. Like it's just the things that we picked up along the way before we fully developed into our adult consciousness. So we just like took things for Bible, and we're like, okay, so that person said this rude thing about me. That must be true.
yeah,
and
yeah.
and still, like, we may consciously not feel that same way, but if the subconscious belief is saying otherwise, that's what's going to be manifesting in the results of our life.
Yeah, that's a for as far as like emotions and stuff, I'm wondering if you can talk about too the stuff that might come up, because it's for some people, I feel like it's so different. There can be elation, there can be tears, there can be like, when
Yeah,
you're doing body work, what can people expect? And I know it's have almost no expectations and whatever's coming up, but can you talk about some of the like what people can go through just to
totally. And I think, I mean, this kind of falls into, again, like, I mean, what's happening in that, all that we've been talking about, the validation, the dropping in, is self-connection,
yeah,
because that's what we're missing. When the emotion that feels uncomfortable or scary to experience shows up, we self-abandon and we disconnect from ourselves. So all of these things of dropping in to the acceptance, to the validation, we're connecting with ourselves. So when you work through all those previous steps that we were just talking about, you are going to find yourself in a place where you can then ask yourself, like, what does my body want to do with this energy? And I think that's where people can sometimes, get confused or feel like it's too much. They're looking at what everyone else is doing to release their energy and like, oh, to heal this emotion or to do this thing, I have to journal, or I have to cry, or I have to, I mean, everyone should cry. It's healthy for everyone to cry. But whatever it is, like cold plunging or whatever it is, it's really about checking in with yourself. There is no one right way to go about doing that. But again, it can be things like breath work, EFT tapping, somatic, like shaking your body, somatic movement. Again, it's energy. It wants to move.
yep,
Cold exposure, emotional release, all of these things. And then again, what that is ultimately gonna do is process that energy out. And as a byproduct of that, your energy starts to elevate.
yep,
Like, I mean, when we clear out the old trauma and the old limiting beliefs and the old energy blocks, we vibrate higher. And
yep.
that tracks in a whole new, timeline of receiving.
Yes, 100%. I love it so much. And that's now, what advice do you have for people who do currently are like, I feel stuck, whether it's in a job, in a relationship, in finding a life's purpose? What advice do you have for them?
Baby steps is my answer. No, but I think, I mean, so many people are stuck here. Again, they know better and they aren't doing better. And I can almost guarantee that it's because you're stuck in some kind of black and white thinking. Like,
Yep,
you don't need to conquer the entire mountain in a day, nor will you. The real key to embodiment is the small and consistent integration of what you know.
yep.
So now, to those listening, who here has said, like, I'm going to completely overhaul my life and change everything about it? And then a week later or a month later, you find yourself exactly where you started, right? Like, we're both
Yep.
raising our hand.
Yes.
That overtasking,
Yep.
we try to completely overhaul, and that overtasking is a sneaky form of self-sabotage, because again, the brain wants to confirm the core beliefs that it has in place.
Yeah.
So if you have a core belief of, I don't really take risks, like I feel this thing, but I never really hold myself to my word on it, yet
Mhm.
you're giving yourself, all these demands of changes that are, like, literally aren't built for longevity. Your subconscious is going to be able to continue to confirm, like, see, you can't do this. And that keeps us stuck in a cycle of shame. So the key to honestly creating any type of change in your life is building an identity of self-trust.
Mhm.
And that means starting small. Like, I meet with clients who are trying to change 17 aspects of their life, and then we'll chat and we'll take that down to like two, maybe three things.
Mhm.
And but they'll see more results in the next week than they have in the last 6 months of that hamster wheel of overpromise,
Yep.
self-sabotage, self-shame. Right. So, and two, like, the follow-up question is usually like, what do I know to prioritize? Like, what are those two or three things out of the 17 things? There is a method that I use in my work. It's called Domino Goals. It
Okay.
is kind of a lot to get into right now, but it's actually a part of the same Envision Masterclass that I was referencing when we were talking about hypnosis. So that will be available if you want to, if whoever's listening, if they want to check that out through the link in my profile on my Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put all your links and information in the show notes too. So
Yeah. But the other thing that I want to say with this too, I pulled a quote up because I was referencing it myself the other day, and I think it really works here. It's a quote by Bishop T.D. Jakes. I believe it was like an Oprah episode from the 90s. um, and a woman in the audience says, I have doubts about who am I? Who am I to think that I can do this and accomplish great things? Like, I want to take this bold action, but I get paralyzed by fear. And his answer was this. He said, when people see other people with great accomplishments, they assume that they have no fear. The reality is, you got to feel the fear and do it anyways. If you are waiting for your feelings to line up with your decisions, your life will always be on hold. You don't have to ask your emotions to give you permission to be who you were created to be. Everybody has some fear, some voice saying, who are you to? But some people rebuke it and other people birth it. The difference is how long you nurture the thought. The thought comes like a seed in the womb of your mind. You can either incubate it, or you can say, this is not mine, it's not on my agenda, and I'm going to continue on my course.
I love that so much. I know I have the chills right now. I was like, oh, and everybody can resonate with that. Like that's, I mean, in starting your own, in relationships, in life, in anything like that, that's
Yeah.
just making changes, the fear there. And like now with social media and seeing people, like you see people so and think like, oh my God, well, they just have it all together. Like yeah, you don't.
Yes, totally. And I do think another, like the other thing to really think about here is we have two options in this life. Like we can suffer through an inauthentic life, or we can take action that may cause temporary pain in the moment, but it's ultimately leading you to a life of alignment and authenticity and, and no suffering.
Yes.
Which I think is a important distinction, because pain versus suffering, like pain is an inevitable life experience, but suffering is optional.
Yeah.
Pain in context to like feeling the urge to create a more aligned life and not acting on it, that pain is a sign that something's not right.
Yeah.
But the suffering is going to be a sign that you failed to act on that signal.
Yep.
Like suffering's really only present when we're not willing to take that hard, doubtful, fearful, messy action on our pain points.
Yep.
And the thing, like the universe is a mirror, like literally a mirror. So if you look in a mirror, you're not going to expect your reflection to smile at you first. You know that you have to smile first for your reflection to smile back. And that's the game. Like the universe is waiting for you to go first.
Yeah.
And most people have that backwards, and they stay on the waiting timeline, sometimes for their whole life.
Yeah.
But you have, with anything, it's like you have to, obviously with tools to regulate, you're not just frying the nervous system and jumping into the fire. We want to support ourselves on this journey, but you have to jump, and you have to trust that the universe has the net to catch you and wants to catch you, because the universe wants you in your sole purpose more than anyone, because what that does is benefit the collective. So it's going to support you on your quest once you take that first step.
Yeah, and there are a couple things I just want to touch in, but on with the universe and like manifestation, how do you describe it? Because I feel like a lot of people don't understand it, myself included, but like when people think that they're manifesting, or like they almost wait for universe to handle, it's like, well, I made this one move, now I'm like, universe has got to have my back, like kind of like I don't even know how to word it properly, but do you know what I'm trying to say
I
with like,
totally know what you're trying to say.
that's what
And I think the distinction is people think you manifest what you want when really you manifest who you are.
okay.
And so they think, oh, I really want a boyfriend, so I'm going to cross my fingers and like write it 111 times in my journal and send up prayer up to the angels, and maybe it'll happen.
I'm gonna burn my list. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then in their daily life, they're lacking self-intimacy, self-vulnerability, the ability to, navigate conflict or whatever it is that can show up in a relationship. So the big thing with manifestation, there is a massive component of the aligned action, and we kind of touched on it before too, where a lot of that, again, is coming from an illogical place. That's going to be intuition, that's going to be inspired action. But I think where the disconnect that's happening is people aren't then dropping into the feelings, because ultimately it is the feeling of the thing that you desire that you desire. You desire to feel connection, you desire to feel love, you desire to feel success, you desire to feel abundance. So when you're able to energetically embody those things, now we're getting into, the law of attraction, like energy attracts like energy. The fastest way to do that is not to wait for your life to change to embody that new version of yourself, but for you to initiate that through an integration of the version of yourself you desire to be and pulling that into the present moment. And I think that a really kind of practical way that you can start to apply that to your life is through taking a new approach to affirmations. Because a lot of the time I have clients that come to me and they're like, I say these things, Jess, like I say I'm successful and that I'm rich and that I'm power and all these things, and I don't feel it. And that's the missing piece. Like we need to feel it, because again, our energy or our emotions are energy and motion. That's the frequency that we're vibrating at. So I really encourage them to, meet themselves where they are, find things, I call them affirmation bridgers, but rather than just being like, I am successful, I am on my way to being successful, or I believe it's possible for me, for myself to be successful. Just to kind of, again, find that sweet spot between something that is expanding you out of the current known, but isn't so much so that there's just complete disconnect and it's really not doing anything to serve you.
Yep, I think that makes so much sense, and, like, thank you for elaborating on it. That's why I
Of
was like,
course.
I can't put words to it, but I know I've been there before, and, like, I
I
hear
find that to
people
be
like,
somewhat of a superpower where people are like, "Can I just this?" And it
yeah,
seems and I'm like, "I got you," because I know it. I get it.
yep, and I know we're coming up on, like, time and stuff, but I had an interesting conversation with a friend last night, and I think it's fitting to this conversation and what we're talking about and finding your soul's purpose and life's purpose, and the conversation was, would you wanna know the date of when you were gonna die? And my was like, "No, I'm living for my purpose, I'm living in the moment," like, and my friend had a very different opinion. She was like, but I would live differently. Like I would sell off all my 401k. I would travel the world and do whatever. I go, I've already done all that to start my business. Not that that's what everybody should do, but it's just, I feel like that conversation is very interesting where, um, yeah, I don't necessarily even know where I'm going. It was an interesting
No,
conversation.
I get, but it's almost interesting because I think that, I mean, I wouldn't want to know either, but I
Oh,
almost think that that's like that could even be like a practice of expansion where you kind of drop into the reality of like, again, I mean, which is the truth that we don't know how long we're here and what we have to do. And it's like your friend said, she's like, well, if that was the case, I would travel the world. I would sell this. And it's like, well, how come you're not doing it now then?
but because reality is you do need and that's what I'm going into. Like I totally I blew up my life basically and started
Yeah.
over. Not everybody is going to do that. Not I don't have a family. I was able to do that on my own, but the reality is there is some sort of like there is financial like stability that you have and family, and like not everybody can just like do that. So what is that balance is like just a very
Totally.
interesting, like, how do you live like you were gonna die tomorrow, but realistically? Like,
Yeah, right. And I do think it is, it's just tapping into desire. Like I think that a lot of the time we think that life is made up of the really big moments, and we can tap into passion and desire and fulfillment in our cup of coffee in the morning and the conversation with the stranger on the street. And I think that when we are living a more fulfilling life in that sense, there's not so much of the pull to do all the big things, because that's not where the fulfillment is coming from. Granted, they're amazing experiences, but you're like, my life is full. Like that's a cherry on top rather than I'm living for that.
yes, yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's I might have had a different opinion too, even a couple of years ago, but now
Wow.
I'm like, I'm kind of trying to embody it, so it just made sense, but yeah. And then just
Totally.
in closing, this has been such an amazing conversation, but what's your best piece of advice for people in life or on their healing journey? I
Yeah.
just
Totally. No, I really thought about this one because obviously there's so many things that I could say, but I think that one of the biggest learnings for me that changing my relationship with this changed so much for me. And that was realizing that self-sabotage is self-protection. Because most people are operating in their life thinking that self-sabotage is this kind of like moral fault.
Yes.
And I know that I operated that way for a long time. I'm like, I must hate myself. Like I must really want to screw myself over and like ruin my own life. When the thing with self-sabotage is you're really getting what you want. We're just not always aware of the part of ourselves that wants it. So for example, again, like I'll have a client come to me and they'll say like, my life sucks. So like I hate everything about my life. And I will present them with the question, how do you benefit from staying exactly the same? And they're like, huh? Like I just told you I want to change everything about what I'm doing. But the client that again wants the intimate romantic relationship but fears getting vulnerable, not getting vulnerable seems like a pretty good reason to not pursue a relationship with real potential. So this is really the power of, this was what changed everything for me, is like understanding that I need to align my subconscious beliefs with my conscious desires to call them in. And again, all the like techniques and tools that we've talked about today are incredible resources to do that. Because again, we're working with the subconscious, like this is an unconscious behavior. So most people are just, they feel frustrated that they're not getting the results that they want without realizing that, it's the result of their energy not being in that aligned and embodied place. So I think that really changes everything, because self-sabotage no longer means I hate myself. It means I'm trying to protect myself. And again, I can drop into curiosity and compassion, getting curious about the part of me that wants to self-protect, that feels unsafe in this moment. Because again, that's the prime directive of, or the prime priority of the nervous system and subconscious mind, is just safety.
Yeah.
And when we can drop into that with love and acceptance and space, like we can do the work to make sure that when I am up leveling my life, I have the awareness to make sure that I'm allowing myself the space to flourish.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I love that so much. That resonates. That's like kind of right where I'm at on my journey too. So
I love that divine timing.
it is, it is. It's funny because I had
Perfect.
someone ask me last week, like, "What are you so scared? Is it fear? Is it whatever?" And I'm like, "I honestly don't know." I
Well,
would
I mean, I think the fear that a lot, we're like fear of failure, fear of being perceived. There's also a very real fear of success, because again, the body, brain, like it all just wants to stay at the level that is known. And so again, like even setting the alarm 1 hour earlier to us seems like a small little habit. To the grand scheme of quantum possibility, it's like, oh my God, this person's becoming a new like version of themselves. Like that shifts everything. That has the potential to shift their relationships, that, like all these different things in their life. So the subconscious mind is really clinging to, I use this example, like your nervous system and subconscious will choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven, because it's that. There's a great book about this actually, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, where he talks about something called the upper limit problem, which is exactly this. Like we all have this unconscious self-imposed threshold of what we believe we are worthy of or capable of handling. And when we cross that, again, like it can seem like a small habit on the 3D plane but the potential of it, there's so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, so a lot of the time we self-sabotage, aka self-protect, just to bring us back down to like where what's known and where we feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and it makes sense, so much sense when you say it, but it's so funny being in it and kind of like
Yeah, you're like, I know I'm doing this thing, and then
Yep.
I'm catching myself.
That's part of the growth too, is like now I'm like, okay, you sit and kind of like questioning it of like, okay, where's this coming from? What am I actually scared of? Where like, yeah, and more calm with myself. I'm not like, damn it, like, why aren't you like
Right, which again, like is all like what I was just saying with this is, again, like you have a completely different experience when you show up to yourself and your emotions with curiosity and compassion instead of shame and judgment.
one.
So if anyone's going to walk away from this conversation, let it be that.
Yes, seriously. No, this has just been so amazing. I just thank you so much. I love chatting with you every single time we do.
You
And
too.
you're just so full of knowledge and love and light. And I love that you're out here sharing your healing with the world. So it's been
Oh,
amazing.
thank you. No, I know every conversation that we have has just been, yeah, so inspiring, and I'm so glad that everyone got to sit in on this one today.
Love it. Thank you so much, Jess.
Of course.
Thank you so much for taking another holistic view of your health with us. I hope you've really enjoyed today's discussion, and as always, take control of your own wellness journey by exploring the practitioners and modalities available near you or on our directory at www.holistichealthcollab.com. Don't forget to subscribe here so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find more holistic health tidbits at Holistic Health Collab on Instagram. Please leave a rating and review to help us reach more people that might need to hear this information. If you have any questions about today's show or any ideas for future episodes, or if you just want to reach out, you can contact me directly, Kate Maslowski, at kate@holistichealthcollab.com. You can just put podcast in your subject line. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.